Hi, this is Dr. Jarrod Spencer, sports psychologist, and welcome to the Mind of the Coach CD program. This is a program designed for you as a coach that's going to empower you with sports psychology nuggets of information. Let's get started now. One of the things that undermines a lot of team success is the trauma and the drama that comes along with coaching adolescents and young adults. What I encourage you to be aware of if you're a coach in this situation is something called the abuse triangle. The more technical term is the intergenerational transmission of abuse triad. We'll call it the abuse triangle for short. I want you to imagine a triangle, and at each of the points, at the top point, imagine a circle, and in that circle is the word abuser. In the lower right-hand corner is another circle with the word victim. And in the last corner is a circle with the word rescuer. Get that image in your head of a triangle with abuser, victim, rescuer. Essentially, this is the drama trap that is occurring again and again and again with athletes. And if you are stepping in this trap as a coach, you're going to notice that you're frustrated, that you are becoming enmeshed, that you're becoming drained. If you're a coach, the best way to handle this situation is to not play the game, to not step into the trap of one of these three roles. Allow me to explain. The abuser role. This is somebody that hurts somebody else, either through their words, their actions, but emotionally, physically, somehow they are hurting another person. The victim is a person who feels stuck. They might feel depressed. They might feel like they're powerless over the person who's got the control or the abuse in their life. And so they feel like there's not much they can do to get out of this situation. The rescuer is a person who will do whatever it takes to help a victim get unstuck, that they will do whatever it takes to help them get freed from that bad situation. It takes three people for this whole dynamic to go round and round and round. And all of us, if we're honest, will step into one of these roles or multiple roles in every single day. Of course, nobody wants to see themselves in the abuser role, but sometimes we do that. And in fact, even in coaching, sometimes we inadvertently do that. And so oftentimes an athlete may even look at their own coach as somebody who's kind of hurting them in some way. When you're aware of somebody playing one of these roles, let's just say you recognize somebody on a team is playing the victim role and they feel as though there's nothing they can do to get out of this situation that they feel stuck in. Maybe they feel like, I can never beat that opponent. He or she will always be better than me. You may try to step in as the rescuer, and a lot of times that's what coaches do. They step in the rescue role, but you will never be able to rescue another human being. It's unfortunate, but it's true. What we can do is we can help that individual help themselves. We've got to get them unstuck. We've got to empower them that they can fight off the abuser or the person who's inflicting some harm, or maybe it's even themselves, an aspect of themselves that they're fighting. But by empowering them to break that dynamic enables that individual to be freed from that. It's a very important dynamic that is very common in American society. In fact, think of any movie we've seen in America. The dynamic of this abuse triangle is being played out. There's a person who's in the victim role in the beginning of the movie, and there's somebody infusing some harm on them. And then somebody comes along and tries to rescue them. And the rest of the movie is about the rescuer trying to get the victim away from the abuser. And there's a big battle scene in the end between the rescuer and the abuser. And the rescuer wins, breaks up that dynamic, and everyone lives happily ever after. That's one reason why we love movies in America, is because we see that abuse triangle resolved in 2 hours. But you know, on your team, that triangle goes around and around and around. Don't step in the trap. Here's the recommended advice. If you find yourself playing one of those roles, own up to it, see who's in the other two roles, how you're stuck in it, and get out of it. If you're playing the rescue role too much, back off. If you yourself are playing the victim role, then take self-responsibility and do the extra work and effort you need to get yourself unstuck. In particular, use your words and confront the person in the abuser role. And if you are in that abuser role, I encourage you, be aware of how your actions, words are negatively hurting other people. And then go apologize and take self-responsibility as best you can. Heal those wounds, and you'll step out of that role. If you want to decrease drama on your team, model it by stepping out of the abuse triangle, knowing when you're playing the roles, and ending a cycle that undermines performance. One reason you love sports is because sports is a venue that enables an athlete to just come alive, to use their God-given talents and to see them perform at a very high level, to have that joy and enthusiasm. And so I encourage you to utilize this quote by Howard Thurman. He said these words, "Don't ask what the world needs. Instead, ask what makes you come alive. And then go and do that. Because what the world needs are people that are alive." And so I encourage you as a coach to find those positions, those experiences that make your athletes come alive, and try to put them in those situations, in those positions, so that you get to see that they get to experience that. Because when they feel alive, you will get from them a performance that excels anything that they previously have done. Focus on the positive. It's very important as a coach that you give your athletes some building material that they can continue to use to grow as an athlete. And the best building material are positive ideas in their performance. Too often, coaches will point out, well, you did this, this, and this wrong, and you maybe even study some film together, and coaches will point out what you did wrong. When that occurs too often, what happens is, in the athlete's mind, they keep thinking about what they did wrong, which is in turn going to make it more likely that this is what they did wrong. And they'll do it again and again in the moment of truth. Instead, you want the messages stuck in your athlete's mind about what they're doing right and how to do it better. And so as you study film, it's very important to point out, this is what you're doing right. This went really well. This is phenomenal. I'll give you an example. I know of one wrestler who got pinned in a minute and a half as a sophomore when he was wrestling a state champion. In that match, he got in very deeply on that state champion's leg. Well, unfortunately, yeah, he did get pinned very quick, but the coach said to him, if you can get on that guy's leg, you can get on everybody's leg that you wrestle the rest of the season. And so that athlete believed that because the coach took one positive out of that match, and it made the athlete believe he can get in on anybody's leg because that guy was a state champion. That's given an athlete the building material necessary for positive performance and growth. If all the coach focused on was the fact that he got pinned and didn't perform well, that gives the athlete nothing to build off of. You've got to give them the building material. So when do you do this? I think practice is a perfect time to do it. After a match, and certainly for parents driving home from the match or a game, that's the worst time to try to point out the negatives. Maybe somewhere in there you can point out some of the positive, but a lot of this is done really in the practice room. And as you get closer and closer to the next competition, you want to be building that positive as well. I know of one team that literally will play a highlight video from their previous game as they are approaching on the bus their next game, which essentially shows this is the way that we want to perform. It has video clips of all the right things that the team does together or that the team did in the last game. This creates an image in the player's mind of this is how we do it. This is very important, and I encourage you with focusing on the positive so that it gives the athlete building material for positive growth. As a coach, one of the most important things for you to do is to have your own outside interests, hobbies, passions besides the sport. One of the things I hear from athletes is that they oftentimes get frustrated because when they talk to their coach, all they can talk to them about is that particular sport. People connect in different ways, and particularly people connect on different levels. And so if you are a coach, bring to the table some of your outside passions or hobbies and let the athletes know about that. Talk about it. This will create opportunities and avenues for them to connect with you. So if you're a hunter, talk about that. If you like to ride bikes and cycle or mountain bike, talk about it. Whatever you have as an outside hobby, it's very important that you model that to the athlete. Here's why. As an athlete progresses in their sport, more and more of the world just talks to them about that particular sport. It's the same with you. And so a lot of times people just want to talk about, or athletes and coaches rather, just want to talk about anything other than the sport. And so I oftentimes say to parents and to the kids, what percentage of the time are you talking to each other about that particular sport? You'd be surprised, but in the high school level, especially for juniors and seniors who are doing well and on the varsity, they sometimes will say that they speak with their parent about 90 to 95% of the time about that particular sport or grades. It's all performance driven. It's so encompassing on their life. as a coach, you could go really far at developing a better relationship with your athletes if the two of you can connect on something. So if it's not particularly your interest, then find out what your athletes' interests are. Identify their hobbies and really check in with them. How are they doing? What are their passions about outside of their particular sport? If you do this, you're developing connectedness, emotional connectedness. You're having the ability to relate to them on different levels. When this happens, an athlete is more likely to perform better for you. The more human beings know each other on personal levels, on multiple levels, the more they want to please the other person, perform for the other person, and be liked by the other person. And so this is a great opportunity for you to be a better coach by connecting more deeply with your athletes. One of the greatest challenges a coach can have is dealing with the injured athlete. Few things can derail a season more than when one of your athletes gets hurt and can't perform. There's a great risk involved here for the athlete when they're injured that many coaches overlook. And I want to explain this to you. It's the psychology of the injured athlete, and it has a lot to do with a chemical called serotonin. When an athlete is training hard and they're sweating and they're working out every day and they're feeling good, it's because the body's helping to release serotonin, which is a feel-good chemical. The more serotonin is higher in the body, we feel good. The lower it can be, we can actually feel depressed. It's one of the key chemicals involved with depression. And so when an athlete gets injured, particularly if it's something like a knee injury where they can't even be on the exercise bike and get a sweat going, what happens is over a week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks or a month, the athlete actually experiences a significant dip in the level of serotonin that they're getting. That crash can actually feel to them like a huge swing in their mood. They might become irritable, cranky, withdrawn, isolated. They may gravitate towards increasing their appetite or decreasing their appetite. They may have problems sleeping, and so they may become negative. You may feel friction between them. They may even look to find comfort in drugs or alcohol to help them with this dramatic shift in their mood. It's largely because of the big drop in serotonin when an athlete goes from a high level of working out to not being able to do so. It's important as a coach that you are aware of this phenomenon, that you can address this with the athlete, that you can educate them about this, that you can talk with trainers or parents, get them to the doctor or counselors or sports psychologists, or find ways to increase serotonin, like helping them get a sweat going, whatever way that would work, that would be in line with what their doctors and trainers say, or just being exposed to bright light or warmth and sunshine can do wonders. This isn't going to be enough to offset the dramatic dip that they're experiencing, but it can be enough to kind of maybe take the edge off. And so as a coach, it's your responsibility to know that the shift in your injured athlete's mood may very well be in part influenced by serotonin levels in the body. Take advantage of doors. In your athletic facility, there are a lot of doors that your athletes go in and out of, and you're missing a great opportunity if you as the coach don't have some type of message either on that door or above that door. One great example of a coach who has taken advantage of this actually has the door to the practice facility with a beautiful sign, not just a piece of paper, but a beautifully done sign that says, when you come in here, be ready to push yourself, work to get better, motivate others, put the team first. That's really impressive. And on the other side of the door, when you're leaving that training facility, it says, when you leave here, believe in yourself, take care of your body, represent the team positively, and stay hungry. That's a great thing that I think every coach should do to very clearly set the tone and get into your athletes' heads the messages that you want them to have, the mindset necessary to achieve what you want them to have in the practice room. And so there are other programs like the University of Notre Dame that has the classic sign, play like a champion, above the tunnel as they're going onto the field. What do you have on the doors to your practice facility, on the locker room doors, or maybe in your own office? And if you don't have something, I encourage you to take this page out of other coaches' playbooks and put these on your doors today. A phenomenal technique that you might be missing is that of imagery. At the end of your practices, when your athletes are worn out, when they are literally lying down, exhausted from their practice, there's an opportunity for you right then and there to utilize the technique of imagery to help do two things. One, better their performance down the road, and two, speed up the recovery from that hard practice. When I was a high school athlete, I attended a summer camp where one of the coaches at the end of a tough workout had us lie down and just walked us through an exercise of slowing down our breathing, imagining ourselves very relaxed, seeing ourselves competing in our sport and excelling and experiencing the joy, the enthusiasm, the excitement of a peak performance. And by doing this imagery exercise, which lasted maybe 15 minutes, it took me as an athlete from being incredibly worn out and tired and quickly rejuvenated me. The science behind this essentially is that you take an athlete whose sympathetic nervous system, which is responsible for the go, 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 go of a practice, and you rapidly switch to the parasympathetic nervous system, which is responsible for relax, 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 and that gives a quicker, better recovery to the athlete when they're exhausted at the end of practice. And it gives them the great messages in their mind. If you are not doing what that coach did for me, if you are not leading your athletes in an imagery exercise occasionally at the end of practices, you might be missing a phenomenal technique that can transform your athletes' minds and speed up the recovery process. No matter how great your athletes may be, on the bigger stage, it's normal and natural for them to get nervous. It's important for you as the coach to teach them how to manage pre-game anxiety. It's a great frustration for many athletes that they simply are never taught how to better manage that. Oh, sure, maybe somebody will say, just take some slow, deep breaths. But there's a lot more that you can do as a coach to help them manage the nerves ahead of time. Here are a few key examples. One, watch your own nerves, because they will look in your eyes and they will see that if you're as cool as a cucumber and you're relaxed as well, they will begin to feel less anxious around you. They won't be picking up on your own level of anxiety, and therefore they will feel calm and relaxed. So it's very important to be mindful of your own level of anxiety. I do encourage you to slow down your own breathing and to invite them to do the same. That the more oxygen they take in through slow, deep breathing, and explain this to them, the more their heart rate will begin to drop, because the body has all the oxygenated blood in it now. It doesn't have to work so hard to pump it out. And the oxygenated blood's going to fuel the muscles to perform better. So it's about the slow, rhythmic, deep breathing. And so pay attention to yours, pay attention to theirs, and really try to encourage them to slow it down. I often say that it's like the ocean waves. If you ever stand at the beach and feel really relaxed, it's because the waves come in and out about 8 times per minute, and our breathing gets in sync with nature's own rhythm. So tell them, imagine as though they're standing on the edge of the ocean, listening to the waves, and try to get their breathing in sync with that. So now you're incorporating a visualization and imagery with that breathing. Another important thing is to have them step away from the actual arena of competition. That sometimes all the sounds and the sights and the people and the distractions can be too much. And so have them go off and be by themselves and minimize the distractions around them. Also, it's very important to check what's on their iPod. You see, too many of your athletes are getting too amped up way too early before the competition even starts. And therefore, they don't have enough emotional energy in the tank when the actual game is being played. So check their iPod and make sure that every one of your athletes has relaxing piano music, new age music, some music that actually doesn't have any lyrics in it, that it's slow and rhythmic, and that this would actually drive their heart rate down. This is what all athletes should be listening to an hour or 2 hours or 3 hours before their competition, especially on the bus ride. Not some of their music that's going to get their heart racing, like hip hop or some hard rock or heavy metal, whatever it may be that's going to get their heart really pumped up. That's the music to listen to maybe 20 minutes, a half an hour or so, or maybe even within that hour before the competition. Then get ramped up, but not way ahead of time. So it's very important to help them relax and also use the music to do that. On the bus rides, I encourage them to be very calm and relaxed, not a lot of talking and keep their minds relaxed. Maybe even have a movie, an inspirational movie that they could watch. Something about sports or athletics is very important. Or have them read a book, a sports psychology book, or a book on winning, or a book for enjoyment, something like that. In fact, make sure they always have a book in their book bag that they can turn to when they're feeling anxious and nervous and they need to escape with distraction. Well, I know and you know that they're going to want to go watch videos, and that's okay to a certain degree as long as the videos aren't too stimulating. One thing we don't want to see athletes do is play video games, because video games causes the brain to be in a high beta brainwave state, which means there's a high amount of electrical activity that's going to drain them of their emotional energy. And so no video games prior to the competition, about an hour or so beforehand. And so again, these are just a few of the things that you can do to help your athlete learn to manage their nerves. One last thing is having a mantra, a word or phrase that they can repeat to themselves to elicit a desired emotional state. Have that phrase that they can say, like calm and confident, or confident and calm, whatever it may be, but get them there and give them the words to bring that heart rate down. If you can keep them cool and calm and confident up until that magical moment when it's time to switch, you're going to find that they have more energy in the tank and in the moment of truth towards the end of the competition. Motivation can often come out of deprivation. What I mean by that is that what really drives your athlete to achieve something, to work hard for something, to go after that title, is that deep within them, there's some aspect of their life where they're feeling some deprivation. They're feeling a void. And so if you want to coach them to get more out of them, what I encourage you to do is to really talk with them, really listen to them, really get to know your athlete to find out where that deprivation is. And if you can identify where that deprivation is, then you can stoke that fire a little bit. By stoking that fire a little bit in a healthy, productive way, you can really grow that athlete's motivation. For example, I know of one athlete who grew up in a hard town on a tough street. And because of that, this athlete knew that if he could play his sport really, really well, it would open up more doors for him to get into a better college and get from a better college to a better job, a better career, and a better neighborhood eventually. That ultimately he wanted to get out of that tough neighborhood. And that's exactly what sports did. And it opened up more doors for the athlete. The deprivation was that he really didn't like the neighborhood that he was growing up in, and he wanted to live in someplace safer and better. And so knowing that, a coach could help that athlete really work hard at achieving his goal, because they know, hey, I know that you want to get into a better school and play a sport so you can get out of your neighborhood. And so whatever it may be, you've got to identify that for each and every player on your team. And so the more you can cultivate that deprivation, again, in a healthy, productive way, you're going to find that the intrinsic motivation, which is the internal motivation, not the extrinsic motivation, is going to be really developed. This is vital because the further along you go in sports, it is less about the extrinsic motivation and more about the intrinsic motivation. Why you do what you really do. What deprivation do you have that you're trying to fill, that you're trying to get those needs met so that the sport you do becomes very rewarding? Motivation is often coming out of deprivation. Identify what that is, stoke that fire, and you'll get more from your athletes. One of the greatest coaches of all time, John Wooden, used a technique that is somewhat obsolete today. I encourage you to bring it back with your program. What did John Wooden do? He actually used poetry with his athletes. That one of his interests, one of his hobbies was studying poetry, and he would often utilize that to motivate, to teach, and inspire his athletes. That's something that I hardly hear coaches do today, but I encourage you to significantly study some poetry and give it to your athletes. One reason why this is effective is because athletes can internalize this stuff and get the right messages in their heads, and it can stay with them for a long time. For example, one of my high school coaches would recite a poem whose author is unknown, and he would recite this poem before a high school competition again and again. And I internalized that poem, and it's made a huge difference in my life. The poem is called Pressure, and the words are these. How do you act when the pressure is on, when the chance of victory is almost gone, when fortune's stars have refused to shine and the ball is on your own 5-yard line? How do you act when the going gets tough? Do your spirits lag when the breaks are rough? Or is there in you a flame that grows brighter as the battle grows fiercer? How long, how hard will you fight the foe? That is what the world would like to know. Cowards can fight when they're out ahead, but an uphill grind shows a thoroughbred. So if you wish for success, then tell me, son, how will you act when the pressure is on? Poetry is powerful. Bring it to your athletes. It's about scoring mental points. Encourage your athletes to score mental points. Mental points are those opportunities to get a leg up on your opponent, that these points don't show up on the scoreboard, but you know that you are gaining a leg up on your opponent. You know that you're gaining an advantage. You know that you're gaining some momentum by doing these things. Maybe it's because your team is hustling more than your opponent, or maybe you're communicating better as a team, or maybe there's more respect and organization on the sideline. Whatever it may be, those are all ways to score mental points. And if you can encourage your athletes with scoring mental points, with applying this concept of scoring mental points, they're going to look for those opportunities. You may even give out an award each week, which is the Mental Points Award, to that athlete that literally conveyed all the right messages, carried themselves in the right way, that led the team to a greater performance because he or she was scoring mental points. Long before the final scoreboard says the number of points that led to a win, it was the mental points, the ones that never showed up on the scoreboard, that ultimately brought the teams to their victories. Score mental points. The standard is improvement. Make sure you address your team and let them know that what you expect from them is only improvement. And the reason for this is that every single athlete can improve. Even the worst athlete on your team can significantly improve each and every competition and each and every season. And so if you set the standard as improvement, you'll be amazed at how you'll get greater buy-in from everybody on the team. And you know, and I know that it's important for a team to have everybody working hard, everybody moving in the same direction. And if you're setting the team up for failure by setting the standard as something a bit extreme, like state championship or national championship, which is very difficult to get. And even though that might be some outward standard each and every day, that can't be the message that's being preached again and again, or the athletes will struggle, because that's ultimately a results-oriented standard, not a process-oriented standard. And the process has got to be that of improvement. In each and every practice they can improve, each and every technique they can improve upon. And if you set the standard at improvement, what's going to happen is your athletes will little by little gain more and more confidence. And the confidence will lead them to greater performance. Set the standard for improvement. Here's a page out of the field of psychology that could make a huge difference in your coaching. One of the great pioneers in the field of psychology has been Carl Rogers. And Carl Rogers really encouraged counselors, therapists to have a personality style, a presence in the counseling experience that was really hallmarked by these three things: genuineness, empathy, and unconditional positive regard. If as a coach, you could model those three things as well, you will find that you get more out of your athletes, that you have less friction, and you actually enjoy it a lot more. Allow me to explain. Genuineness. That's you being authentically you, with your flaws and your strengths, but at least people know that you're being real. Today's young athletes can see through the phoniness of people better than any generation that's ever walked ahead of them. And so they want people that are real. Heck, they live in a world where they are exposed to reality TV that's full of fakeness. And so they long for authentic people. Be genuine. Be you. Now, I know what you're saying. You know, sometimes you being you is what they don't really like, and it becomes problematic. Look, at least the difference between you being you and having it work out for you can be if you own it and acknowledge it. Hey, I know I can be a little hard on you at times, or I know that one of my shortcomings is that I may be a little too critical. But as long as you point this stuff out and own it, then people are willing to roll with it and accept you. It's when a person's being genuine and their negative sides aren't being owned by that person that it becomes problematic. The second is unconditional positive regard, that it's very important that another human being on your team knows that no matter what, you are for them, that you believe in them. This is one of the most overlooked aspects of sports psychology and coaching, is that you sometimes as a coach might minimize the impact that you could have without even speaking a word, just knowing that you believe in that athlete. And so you might not fully believe in them in regarding certain traits or aspects of their performance. Like if it all came down to you, I know you could definitely get the win, but you might be able to believe in them like, hey, I believe in who you are and how you treat people and your leadership skills here. But just in some way, somehow, let them feel that you believe in them in some way. Unconditional positive regard, that no matter what they do as a human being too, whether they lost or made a big mistake, that you would accept them, that you would love them and care for them. Here's why. One of the most foundational mistakes in sports is that coaches treat their athletes like objects, that you're only of value to them if they win or if they achieve something great, that the kid on the team that gets the most attention is the kid that's bringing the coach the most praise. But that's problematic. Do not treat your athlete like an object, like they're only of value if they're healthy or performing well. Have unconditional positive regard, and what you'll see is that the athlete performs better for you. Thirdly and lastly, it's empathy. Be empathic, understanding. This doesn't mean that you have to be wishy-washy with your boundaries. You can be very empathic, but also very firm. What I'm talking about is just a warmth. It doesn't even have to be fully about your words that you say. In fact, the words that you say are only 5% of your communication. Your tonality is 25% and your nonverbals are 70%. Communicate to your athletes a warmth and empathy regarding certain situations when they're struggling. And if you can communicate that, particularly with those nonverbals and your tonality, what you're going to find is that they respond better to you, that they'll come to you with greater challenges and deeper issues of life, and you'll be able to coach them, help them through this even more, as opposed to have them start building the wall between you and them, and you struggle and say, I don't know why I have a disconnect with you. The athletes want to connect with you. That's why they're on your team. And so it's very important that we take the page out of Carl Rogers' playbook, and with genuineness, unconditional positive regard, and empathy, you become a better coach for your athlete. There are 3 key variables as a coach that it's important to you to preach to your team. These key variables that you want to see out of your student athletes are these. 1, are they good enough? Do they actually have the physical talent to perform at the level that you need and expect them to be? Are they good enough? The second is, are they mentally tough enough? Do they have the emotional wherewithal to tolerate, to excel, to manage the pressure in the circumstances that they're going to be in? And thirdly, do they have the character? Are they men and women of high character? Do they have good judgment, good decision making? Are they going to bring honor to the program, or are they going to tear it down? It's important as a coach that you emphasize these 3 key variables, that you tell your athletes about these 3 and let them know where they stand on, are they good enough? Are they mentally tough enough? And do they have the character to excel at this level and beyond? Use images with your athletes. If you are not doing this, then you are missing the boat. One of the best examples we've seen in sports of how today's student athletes really identify with images was the Oregon Ducks. Did you see the national championship game played in January of 2011 between the Oregon Ducks and the Auburn Tigers? The Oregon Ducks would actually hold up signs on the sideline to communicate what play was to be run. And the signs would have 3 or 4 images. Everybody for the Oregon Ducks knew exactly what that meant, but the opposing team didn't. And this was a great use of images, which illustrates that with today's student athletes, they get the picture. I mean, it's been said that a picture is worth 1,000 words. So you can communicate much better to this younger generation if you are taking your concepts and putting them with images. A simple example would be this. Each week, You should be identifying a theme, a principle, a lesson that you're trying to communicate, and sum it up in a simple picture. And put that picture on the doorway of the locker room so that everyone would see that little picture or that big picture, and they would instantly remember that picture reminds me about this point that coach taught. This anchors it in the brain much deeper. So if you have plays that you're trying to run and you're using little hand motions and symbols and things like that, that could be helpful. But what if you just held up a picture and it was linked with a certain play? Now you are beginning to transform your coaching style and transform what's in your head and getting it into their heads using a form of communication that resonates so much more with their generation. Use images. Have your athletes practice the walk of the matador. Think about it. Have you ever seen a matador? They're inside an arena with a bull that's charging at them and essentially wants to kill him. But the matador seems so cool under pressure, so calm, so graceful. And so I know this may sound a bit extreme in your particular sport, but in the practice room someday, have them actually walk around and practice the walk of the matador. Shoulders back, chin up, eyes exuding a confidence, breathing that's slow and rhythmic, just having an aura of commanding that space that they're in. And so if you can coach your athletes to walk around having the walk of the matador, they're going to get a sense, albeit a bit of an extreme, maybe even a silly experience, but they'll get a sense of what it's like to walk around very confident and very calmly. And if they can experience this, and if you could even show them video clips of matadors and how they do this, that's the feel that you want them to have in your particular sport. The feel of confidence and calm, walking around out there in the heat of the battle in a way that conveys a message that I'm in control, that I've got this, that I'm on top of my game. And so as best you can, practice with them the walk of the matador. It's about getting your team in the optimal performance mindset at the right time. And as a coach, you set the tone for this. Think of the performance curve. On the horizontal axis at the bottom, it's stress, and on the vertical axis on the side, it's performance. And there's a bell-shaped curve. Now, obviously, as stress increases, performance goes up, and you want to make sure that your athletes are performing in the top range of that performance curve. But too often as a coach, you might actually be hurting the team because the team is not amped up enough, or they're amped up too early. It's really about the timing, and you set the tone for this. And so if there's a really big game, it's important for you to not get too emotionally expressive 2 hours, 3 hours before the game. Because if you're all fired up too early, they're going to feed off of that. They're going to get fired up too early. And consequently, what's going to happen is that your team would be ready to play the game 2 or 3 hours before the actual game begins, and they're going to be so drained come the later part of the game that they're likely to get beat. And so you've got to keep your athletes calm and relaxed, mellow. And so you can express that to them. You can explain that to them. You can model that to them. And so by keeping your own demeanor relaxed, your breathing slow, your delivery of your words at a comfortable pace, if you can be poised and then let them see you gradually getting fired up at the appropriate time, they too will get fired up at the appropriate time, so that right before the game begins, now they're inside that optimal performance zone and they're on the front side of that curve, so they have plenty of energy to withstand a long, grueling game. It's important for you to model to them this technique of hitting the optimal emotional intensity level at the right time. Every team takes the attitude of the coach. So how's your attitude? Well, of course you're going to answer good, or maybe if you're really honest, at times it may not be so good. Sports reveals character, even your character. And so it becomes very important that if you recognize that your attitude isn't exactly where you want it to be, that you have the necessary means to make the adjustments behind the scenes. Because your team will take your attitude, what you literally stand for, the messages that you send to the team, either in words or just internalize subtle messages that you're conveying beyond your words. They will internalize all of that. And so if you have a situation where your attitude isn't so good, I would encourage you to step away, to give yourself a day off. If you're a coach, you know you already give some of your athletes time away if they need a mental health day or day to recharge. But too often as coaches, you might not do it for yourself. And so I'm urging you to make sure that emotionally you're feeling better. One of the best things that I've seen as a sports psychologist with a lot of coaches today is that they have a confidant, somebody that's literally in their corner, somebody that can speak truth into their life and say, hey, I think maybe you need to step away for a moment, or that was a bit harsh, or somebody they can ask, hey, how am I doing today? And so if you don't have that confidence, I really encourage you to consider that possibility. Your attitude will be adopted by the team. And if you aren't liking the attitude of the team, you should probably start looking at your own attitude. Hold that mirror up to yourself and be honest about how you're feeling. If you're perhaps frustrated, then they're going to be frustrated. They're going to model it right back. Make sure you've got the necessary means behind the scenes to make an attitude adjustment of your own. Who's on your board of directors? I mean, your personal board of directors. Do you have one? If you don't, I encourage you right now to grab a piece of paper and begin to jot down a few names of people that would be on your board of directors. And I encourage you to actually ask them and say, hey, will you be on my personal board? And I just want to be able to bounce some ideas off you or get some real insight and wisdom. I mean, to have some people in your life that you can let your guard down with, that you can be real, that could be mentoring you, pouring into you, or be accountability partners. Think about it. Who are your mentors? Who are your role models? Who are your accountability partners? These are people that are really important in your life. In addition to also make sure that who's your confidant, the person you can unload to. The health and well-being of your mind and the longevity of your career is going to be largely impacted by the board of directors that you have. And particularly if you're a guy, this is very important because women do a much better job of vocally expressing to people in their inner circle their thoughts, feelings, and concerns. But guys, that's not one of our strengths, and therefore this becomes an even greater matter. Many of the very best coaches that I know personally or read of have an inner circle of people that they can really confide in. What about you? Who's on this board of directors? And then the next step is, how often are you communicating with them? I can share with you that in my life, there are some people that once a month we set up a half an hour phone conversation to make sure that we connect. Or for other people, it's quarterly that I get together with and we go for a long walk and really share and discuss. It's like this old proverb, as iron sharpens iron, so man sharpens man. And it's important that you've got people either weekly, monthly, or twice a year that you get together for a walk or a phone conversation or a lunch, or maybe you're in a small group study of a book or something like that where you can be real. There are lots of important people in your life. Get them on your board, make it official, and watch how this transforms your coaching. Your athletes will never remember what you tell them. But long after their sport has ended and their time with you is gone, they will always remember how you made them feel. So what's very important when you communicate with your athletes is that you're paying attention to your tonality, that you're paying attention to your non-verbals. All of this is going to influence how that individual feels. Now, of course, you can't always make an athlete feel like they're better than they really are. But ultimately, you want them to feel something positive, somewhat inspired, motivated. The trouble there is that you can't want it more than they do. You can't want the success. You can't want the championship more than they do. If they don't want it enough, then you can't want it that much for them. You're not going to be able to make up that ground. And so focus on making them feel good, but at the same time, you can't want it more than they do. There are 4 main coaching styles, and these styles are the same as the 4 main parenting styles. It's important as a coach that you recognize where you are at regarding these 4 styles and what you might be able to do to tweak your style to be a bit better. The 4 styles are essentially this. The authoritarian is the coaching style that is high in demandingness, high in control, but low in empathy and low in warmth. This is the coach that'll get a lot out of their athlete, but oftentimes they do so by being so hard, so harsh, that the athletes crack under pressure, that they sometimes struggle to really gel well as a team. They may have a lot of success and win, but off the field or in the locker room, the dynamics amongst the team isn't all that positive. The next coaching style is the authoritative. This is the coaching style that's high in demandingness, high in control. Again, you will be here on time for practice, and you will be in bed at a certain curfew, and you will do all the right things. But at the same time, they're high in warmth. They're high in empathy. They are compassionate people. This is the best coaching style. These are the coaches that thrive, that have great longevity. Families tend to like these coaches. Athletes years afterwards come back and thank these coaches, like to coach with these coaches. And these are coaches that really have the best balance. The next coaching style is the passive coaching style. This is the coach that is low in demandingness, low in control, but high in warmth and high in empathy. This is not a healthy dynamic. This is the coach that everyone loves, and they really have a lot of fun with the coach, and everyone really likes the coach, but they're not winning, and there's oftentimes problems within the programs. For example, the kids are drinking, the coach knows about it, and he looks the other way. Or there's some hazing going on in the locker room, and coach just minimizes it or pushes it under the rug. And so this is a very difficult dynamic to be in. As a coach, you'll be very much liked by your team, but not really respected by them. The last is the laissez-faire coaching style. This is the coach who's just low in empathy, low in control, and also low in demandingness, low in compassion. This is the coach who really is just taking up a position. They're not really that concerned whether or not their athlete succeeds or not, or what they're really doing off the field. And this is the coach that probably should really check in with themselves about why they're doing what they're doing. Is it maybe time to exit? What is all this leading to? That it's essentially about demandingness and empathy. These are the two variables, and you want to be high in both of those to be the most effective as a coach. Too often what I see is that coaches might be slightly higher in the demandingness, slightly lower in the empathy, and that's a difficult position to be in for a coach in today's day and age. Why? The kids are more psychologically minded. They're requiring more emotional attention, and so that warmth, that empathy, that compassion goes a long way. Now, obviously, for some coaches listening to this that might be slightly older, maybe in their 50s or 60s or 70s, that wasn't the way it was when you were brought up in sports, and I understand that. But with today's 15 to 25-year-olds, their needs emotionally are very important. The coach that can be high in that regard, as well as high in the demandingness and control, are going to be the coaches that have the best longevity. It's very important that you identify your coaching style and where you could tweak one of these variables to get the most out of your athletes. One of the most important things you can do as a coach is to teach your athletes how to handle a loss. Too often, I see that athletes, particularly the ones that win often or have had a lot of early childhood success in sports, actually don't know how to emotionally handle a loss, and it can really unravel them. Here are some suggestions. I firmly believe that even though an individual may lose, it is very important for them on the field or on the court or on the mat, whatever it may be, that they carry themselves with class and integrity throughout the losing experience, and especially the handshake at the end. I encourage you, teach them to keep their chin up, back straight, shoulders back, that they shake their opponent's hand, that they look them in the eye, that they acknowledge that they won, saying good job or good match, that while the other people have their hands in the air, they actually walk off without throwing a temper tantrum. No throwing of their helmet, their headgear, their bat, whatever it may be, until they get far away from the public's eye. So when they're in a locker room or something like that, go ahead then. If they want to emotionally vomit, is what I say, and get it out, that's fine. But you do that privately. You don't do it where there's cameras, photographers, reporters, parents, people to see that. That's the stuff for a locker room behind closed doors. In fact, I encourage an athlete, once they do carry themselves with class in the public's eye and they get to a place where they can be private, then go ahead and cry Cry about it, whine about it, moan about it, express it, get it out of your system. It's like when you have the flu and you lie in bed feeling nausea. Eventually, it's just better if you get up and puke or make yourself puke and just get it out of your system. You'll feel better later. It's the same with a loss. Rather than let it simmer for a long time because an athlete denies it or minimizes it or represses it, I say get it out. And so talking about it is one of the best things an athlete can do. And if they can just talk about it without having a coach or parent trying to instruct them as to what they did wrong, but instead just allow them to vent and get it out, what you'll notice is that an athlete can actually rebound much faster. So again, listening to the athlete, let them tell their story from their perspective. Let them just tell it without trying to correct them or guide them or anything like that. This is vital. Then maybe later that day, later the next day or to practice, then you could reframe and work on the corrections. But it's very important, especially if this is in a tournament where they need to rebound quickly, help them emotionally vomit and get it out of their system. Lastly, if this is in a sport like wrestling, I encourage them change their uniform or take a shower and clean up and just come back out feeling refreshed and ready to go. It's very important in some sports that if you lose and you get a chance to wrestle back, for example, that you can rebound with the right mindset, knowing that you dealt with the loss, you came out the other end of it, and you're ready to go again. The mental aspects of sports far outlast the physical ones. The mental aspect of sports far outlast the physical ones. This is a message that I send again and again, and it's one that I believe so strongly in, and you do too, that you as an athlete or a former athlete, you probably don't have the same physical conditioning that you once had, but the mindset that you got from the coaches or sports, that can stay with you for a lifetime. And so I urge you to be very aware of your words. As a coach, you've got the ability in the position of authority to speak into young lives. And I know you like that position and I know you value that position. But in today's society, I'm urging you to really respect it even that much more. One encouraging word can make a difference for an entire person's life. One discouraging word could be really hurtful. You've probably heard this before, but there are some people that would say for every one word of discouragement or criticism, you probably need to offer about 5 words of encouragement. That's a good model with today's young people. In particular, I think one of the best things you can say to an athlete are words of reassurance. Why? Because performance anxiety is what undermines most people. Even the very best athletes, when the stage gets biggest, they're going to experience some performance anxiety. And the antidote to performance anxiety is reassurance. If you can reassure your athlete, it's going to really help alleviate their anxiety. But be careful. You might say the words, but if they look in your eyes, they might not fully believe what you're saying because you don't believe what you're saying. So you've really got to focus on reassuring them and have the deep conviction that you believe in them. The mental aspect of sports far outlast the physical ones. And the mental aspect of sports are largely going to be influenced by the words of a coach. Value them, respect them, use encouragement, use reassurance, and I promise you, this will have a positive impact on your athlete's performance, both now and beyond. One concern I hear from coaches is that they are often telling me that today's student athletes do not come to the table with the necessary leadership skills that they would like to see. That in essence, it's sometimes tough for a leader to emerge from the bunch within the team. One reason for this is because sports has become so micromanaged by adults that what we're seeing is the students today lack the conflict resolution skills that kids once got from resolving conflicts on the playground amongst themselves. Therefore, do you have a leadership program built in to your team? If not, I encourage you to do so. And in particular, I encourage this. If you're a high school coach or a college coach, identify your sophomores. Your sophomores are your budding leaders on the team, and take all of your sophomores and run them through a leadership program. It may be something as simple as this. Each month, every sophomore on the team has another assignment. Maybe one month you're reading a book like Tony Dungy's Uncommon, or or something like that. And then you're going to meet and talk about that book for an hour. Another idea is to have a community service project another month. And the entire sophomore group goes, let's say, to a homeless shelter and serves breakfast that morning. Another month, have a movie night where there's a particular movie that you really like the messages in it, and you all get together with popcorn and you all watch that movie. Another month, you may bring in a guest speaker and have somebody come in and share an inspiring message with the team. All of this stuff can be done with a very, very low to minimal budget. Sure, there are lots of great leadership companies out there that would deliver fantastic messages for athletes. And if your budget can afford that, I encourage that. But if it can't, at least do something. There are lots of things, I'm sure 12 ideas that you can come up with for the 12 months of the year that you would be continually pouring into your sophomores. The reason you want to do this is, number one, you've got to give them the skills that they apparently are not getting on their own. You've got to teach them leadership. And number two, what's going to happen is you're going to flush out the best leaders among that group. It's very likely you're going to be able to walk away saying, I think that's my future captain right there, or my future captains right there. And so by being able to empower them, you're also flushing out the best leaders within them. Doing this is going to help you in your program have great longevity, better conflict resolution, better leadership, because you're giving them the skills, not hoping they bring it to the table. There's more to life than your sport. And one of the concerns I hear from many athletes is that their coach seems to not get that. That I know and you know as a coach that yes, you do get that message. There's far more to life than just your particular sport. But sometimes you might not be conveying that as clearly to your athletes as you think that you are. This is something that I hear from the athletes again and again. And so it's important for you to express to them that you get this, that you understand this, that you know this, and that you clearly share stories or experiences, incidences from your life that let them know that you get it. It's not that letting them know this is going to devalue the importance of what you do. In fact, it's going to do just the opposite and let them know that you're a person and that, like them, they want to win, you want to win, we want to win as much as the next person. But by taking the edge off of this, it actually is going to take the pressure off and you're all going to be able to relax into it a little bit more and perform better. It almost seems paradoxical. But use quotes like the one from Troy Aikman, who said when he walked on the field after he won the NFL Super Bowl, he said, is this it? Is this all there is? That essentially he won the Super Bowl, got to the pinnacle of sports, and realized this isn't all that it was cracked up to be, that this can't be all there is in life. Or Deion Sanders, who literally drove his car off a cliff out of desperation because he wanted out of this life of emptiness. He felt so empty inside from sports and his success that he was achieving from it. That for him, there was something deep, something spiritual, a relationship with God that was missing, and he wanted that. That there was more to life than just sports, and he found it. And so as a coach, model to your athletes the importance of keeping sports in context, keeping it in its proper perspective, and conveying the message that there's more to life than just sports. Communication is key. And as a coach, one of the most important things that you could do is to actually communicate the central messages, the mission, the vision, the goals of your program clearly on one piece of paper so that everybody that's a part of your program can see what you're about. Do you actually have the mission, vision, goals, or maybe a clear image of what your program is about or where you want to go? Is that someplace prominent where everyone can see? Too often what I hear from coaches when I ask that question is, no, I don't have that. I mean, it's in my head, but it's not out there. It's very important for everybody to literally be on the same page. And that starts from the top down with you, the coach, writing down the mission, vision, goals, or central image of what the program is all about. Allow me to give you an example. I know of one athletic program that clearly has in their workout facility a very large mission statement written out. I also know of one athlete in particular who had an image on his door of his locker that was saying, hey, this is where I want to go. And everyone else liked that image so much that they made that the image for the whole locker room. And therefore, it became a simple picture that was worth 1,000 words that got everyone going in the same direction. And so above the door of the locker room, could you possibly put a quote or a statement or an image or something? Is there an email that you could send out that would literally say, this is the vision that I have? I mean, you're the coach. Your job is to be vision casting. And so nothing becomes more concrete than when it becomes written down into words and people can literally rally around and be on the same page. So it's very important that you vision cast, not just with your words, your mouth rather, but also in the written word. Get on the same page, communicate your vision, let everyone know what you're about, what you stand for in terms of your morals, your ethics, your character, your leadership, what you'll accept, where you want to go, and paint that picture. The more you, the leader of the team, do this, the better off you're going to be. And the reason is simple. Every team takes the attitude of the coach. Make your attitude clear of what you really want them to adopt, and they will intrinsically inherit those messages, internalize them, and make them their own, and they'll be on the same page with you in the beginning, middle, and end of the year. What are your outlets? It's important for you to let out the tension that you carry as a coach. In sports are largely emotional, and somebody's got to carry that emotional tension. Oftentimes it falls on the head coach. And so it becomes important for you as a head coach, or even as an assistant coach, to have some way to let out that tension. And certainly there are negative ways to let out the tension, and we see so many coaches undermine their character because of these things, alcohol being one of the big ones. But I'm encouraging you to have healthier outlets. I know one former Olympic coach who had two great outlets, fly fishing and woodworking. And even though he competed and coached at a very high level, he had great outlets, a way to let out his tension. If somebody asked you today, what are your outlets? What do you do for fun? What do you do to blow off steam? How do you release the tension that you experience as a coach in healthy, proactive ways? What would you say? Do you have one or two very clearly defined outlets? If not, I'm going to encourage you to discover what that may be for you today and to really work hard on letting out that tension. Why? If you don't, you'll be like a soda can that just gets shaken up again and again, and the pressure gets so hard that eventually, when it is released, it's going to be a mess. And that's when a lot of great athletes stumble and fall and say something or do something that wouldn't quite be in sync with their personality, their character, but it's because they didn't have the outlet for the tension. Don't let that be you. Develop your outlets today. As a coach, you've got to be pouring into yourself. It's very important, particularly when you're coaching today's young adults or adolescents, that you are getting the current research, psychology material out there on today's young people. What books are you reading? What books are in your book bag? That as you travel to and from competitions on the bus ride, I encourage you to model to your athletes the books that you're reading and that you are trying to educate yourself. You see, if you are simply pouring into other people all the time, it's going to be very draining. And eventually, you're going to grow stagnant in your coaching style. I urge you to make sure that you are listening to books on CDs in your car, that you are going to conferences as much as you can, that you have books or people that you speak with about new and cutting edge topics. If you're listening to this CD, you're probably already on that path. And I applaud you for that. But it's not enough just to have this information being poured into you. You've got to package it in your own language and share it with other people. It's very important that this is a two-way street. You are being poured into, and then you are pouring into others. Otherwise, again, you're going to grow stagnant. The athletes are going to begin to anticipate exactly what you would say in most situations. And eventually, your ability to connect, produce, and perform with them and for them is going to be limited. What are your pressure relief valves? As a coach, it's very important that you have ways that you can release the tension that is inside of you. When I hear of a coach that's intense, I think of it as he's in tension inside. That can be a good thing if it's channeled in a productive way, but ultimately, privately, you've got to have ways of releasing that tension. Obviously, exercise is one of the best ways to release tension, but that's often not enough. You've got to have multiple ways. Unfortunately, for many coaches, their pressure relief valve is their significant other. And unfortunately for that significant other, too much of that conversation between those two human beings gets chewed up talking about that particular sport or having that coach vent. If you ask those significant others privately, like I have, you might find that they report that, they would just like to talk about something else other than that particular sport. So develop multiple pressure relief valves. Obviously, I'm biased to sports psychology, counseling. And so I think it's very important for all coaches to have somebody either professionally that they're connecting with or another buddy that they can release this tension with. Pressure relief valves are critical. Why? If you don't release the tension, it's going to grow and grow inside of you, and it's going to drain you of your emotional energy. So as the season progresses, we see coaches often get more and more irritable. And as it drains you of your emotional energy, what you're likely to do is this. You will give your very best to the team, to the program, to try and help them get out of that tough situation or win that championship. But whatever's left over emotionally, you'll give to your family. I often say on a scale of 0 to 100 of emotional energy, 100 being the highest, that at the end of the day, coaches will give their leftovers to their kids or to their spouse. And that's not fair. They may walk in the door and their energy is always around a 60 or worse yet, a 50 or a 40. And eventually the kids kind of know, stay away from mommy or stay away from daddy during this time. They're a little edgy. And that breaks your heart to hear that. And it breaks your heart if you're confessing to yourself right now, that sounds like me. If this is you, I'm encouraging you with pressure relief valves. There are lots of opportunities for you to develop outlets, literally to let out the tension. Or maybe it is time to get better workouts. What are you working out? You're working out the tension. Pressure relief valves. Have multiple ones, and I promise you, you're going to feel better and not only give your best to the team, but you're also going to give your best to your private life. You invest so much time and energy into your program. You give your heart and soul to it. But there's going to come a moment when you have to leave it. When it's time to walk away, it's time to retire, it's time to resign. And it's important for you, because you've given so much of who you are to it, to make sure you avoid one of the common trappings that a lot of coaches do, which is something called succession planning. In business, if a CEO is going to leave, oftentimes if he's going to retire, he wants to raise up, mentor, pour into a person who ultimately can take over the program. This is very important in sports as well, particularly for those programs that have a long history of success and coaches that really covet that position. And so who are you mentoring? Who are you raising up? Who are you pouring into so that when it's your time and you decide to walk away, that you could always come back to your program, that you could always admire that program, be connected with the program because your mentee has now taken the reins. That's succession planning. And when it's done well, it could be one of your greatest legacies as a coach. As best you can, I would encourage you to take the word not out of your vocabulary when you are coaching an athlete. The reason is that the mind, for some unexplainable phenomenon, doesn't seem to register the word not very well. And so if you say to an athlete, just don't miss that shot, or just don't get pinned, what the mind registers is just get pinned or just do get pinned. And so it's important to take the word not out of your vocabulary. And this is really tricky to do, but it can make a huge difference. Instead, it's important to reframe your message to the athlete in the positive, like slow down your breathing, focus on the release of the ball as you make that shot, or stay in a good stance and hand fight really well as you're out there wrestling this opponent. And so as best you can, frame things in the positive and take the word not out of your vocabulary. It's an interesting thing how when you frame in the positive and take the word not, worded in the negative statement, out of your coaching, how you'll get better performance out of your athlete. How many tools do you have in your toolbox? I'm not talking about your literal toolbox in the garage, but I'm actually talking about your coaching toolbox. It's very important from the mental side of things that you've got a lot of tools in your toolbox that you can use to motivate, inspire, and ultimately teach and get the most out of your athletes. Here's a few recommendations. I encourage you to have themes. Each week, pick a theme and make the locker room about that. I encourage you to have pictures in the locker room or quotes or messages from famous people in the locker room. I encourage you to bring in guest speakers. You would be surprised how many alumni from your team, your program, would be willing to come back and just say a few words of encouragement to the team for 10 to 15 minutes before practice. That goes a long way. Another recommendation is to give handouts or send an email with an attachment that ultimately, during the time an athlete is with you, it's very important that they leave your program having a whole collection of inspirational handouts or poems or books, things that they literally have either a piece of paper or they actually have a file folder on their computer and they've gotten all this stuff. Look, you've seen a lot of this stuff already, but it's just sitting someplace and you're not getting it to them. I'm urging you to get it to them. Another great tool for the toolbox is having a book list, literally a list of the many books that you've read or that you've seen that you think would be important for an athlete to read. I like Phil Jackson's idea of he continually gives his athletes a book that he thinks is going to help that individual with their professional or their personal life. What books can you give to your athletes? What book list can you provide for them so that they can look at this list and see what they need? You know, ultimately, another tool is that you've got to know the learning style of your athlete. Some athletes are very visual, and many of the younger athletes today really are. So watching movies with them on bus rides is essential. You can get so many great messages to them. Maybe their learning style is hands-on, and you've got to do more with them hands-on. Or for some, it's auditory. If you can give them a book on CD, or if you can say your messages, literally speak them into your computer, record them, and give them to your athlete so they can put them on their iPod and listen to them again and again and again, you're going to help that athlete because you're matching their learning style with a way that you want them to get the information. Lastly, it's about mantras. It's very important to have a mantra. A mantra is a word or phrase that you repeat to yourself to elicit a desired emotional state. So if you want an athlete to have a desired emotional state that you think is optimal for their peak performance, then give them a word or phrase that they can say to themselves. That word or phrase that you give them becomes a connection between the two of you. And so when you say that word to them, it automatically helps trigger that emotional state that you want to see in them. It's very important to give them something like this. So again, what tools do you have in your toolbox? I encourage you to know their learning styles. I encourage you to give them handouts or send them attachments so they have folders on their computers of all this stuff. I encourage you with themes in the locker room. I encourage you with guest speakers to come in, and I encourage you with mantras. These are just a few important tools that if you have them in your toolbox, that's great. Now take the next step and start using them this week. A significant thing you can do to inspire your athletes to be better people, to develop their character, is to let them see you as their coach actually reading. I mean, what are you reading? What books are you reading right now? And can you find a way in sports to have your student athletes see you reading that book? It's a sign of great intelligence when you read more and more. And what you actually read says a lot about what you're actually interested in. It's important for you to model to your student athletes what you want to see them doing in reading. For example, there are books that are very inspirational and very much about leadership and character. And as it relates to sports, I know Tony Dungy has written a number of excellent books on this subject matter. And if you could read one of those books, it would inspire them to do the same. Reading in that genre can only help develop them overall as a person. It's also important that you let them see you reading books just for pure enjoyment, just for a hobby with no link to sports or performance, but for something that's just fun or of interest. For example, right now I'm reading a book, Washington and Me by Jeff Finnegan. And so it's just an outside, interesting book that I find intriguing. Another book that I'm reading is Leadership is Dead, How Influence is Reviving It. That's by Jeremy Kubicek. That's more in the genre of growth and leadership development. And so I encourage you with having some books and reading them on the bus rides, or maybe while you're at a tournament and there's a lot of downtime and you're sitting in the bleachers, you might pull this out of your bag. If you can model to them the power of reading books, you would be surprised to know that little by little, one by one, you might actually see them pulling a book out of their bag and following the example you set for them. And you would reap the harvest of this because of the information that they would internalize and how that would grow them as a student athlete and beyond. Your emotional health and well-being is vital to your longevity, your success as a coach, as well as the team's. And so when I think of emotional health and well-being, I think of it in this biopsychosocial spiritual model. And I want to share this with you as a way to help you have a better grasp of, are you doing the necessary things for your overall emotional health and well-being? Think of a clover. There are 3 leaves and a stem on this clover. One leaf is biological. How you feel is directly related to your genetics and your physiology. If there's some family history of some anxiety or depression, or maybe some substance abuse, that may very well come right down the family tree and be affecting you. How's your physiology? Are you eating the right things? Are you getting the exercise? We know that the more we exercise, the body releases serotonin and we feel better. If you're not feeling good, try to exercise more, but take care of the biological aspect. This has a direct impact on emotional health and well-being. Another leaf is psychological. This leaf is about thinking, feeling, and doing. What do you think about as you go through your day? How is your own self-talk? How do you feel? Unfortunately, for many people in the sports world, they might not have the vocabulary necessary to describe their feelings. They may just say, I feel angry. But anger is probably about so many other things that they're really emotionally hurting about. Since emotional resilience is largely impacted by our vocabulary to describe our emotions, I really encourage you to get a little bit better at identifying your feelings. Thinking, feeling, and doing. What are you literally doing about your situation? And so if you're feeling anxious, what do you do about that? If you're feeling angry, what are you doing about that? You preach this stuff to your athletes, and I'm encouraging you to pay attention to it as well for yourself. So we've got the biological, we've got the psychological. The other leaf is social. This is essentially your work life and your home life. And for many coaches, both of these have to be in balance. And if you're giving too much to your work life, but your home life is suffering, I've seen many great programs and many great careers get undermined because this was out of balance. If you can, as best you can, make the necessary adjustments to understand the emotional needs of the people in your home life. For example, there's something called the 5 love languages. They are time, touch, gifts, words, and service. So for your significant other, how would they rank those ways that they actually receive love? And so it may be that you think that she wants words and you say all the right words, but maybe what she really wants is time. And so if you can understand their love language, then you might be able to have better balance on the home side, which will in turn make you feel better on the social aspect of the biological, social, spiritual model. But the last is the stem. This is the spiritual. Beyond the body, beyond the mind, and beyond the environment, there's something deeper within inside of us. And the stem is the spiritual. And the stem is connected to the source, the ground, which is God. And so if the stem is connected to God, then a clover is going to have a great long life and be very vibrant. However, if the stem is plucked from the ground, it's a matter of minutes or hours before it withers and dies. It's the same with us. How's your spiritual life? Unfortunately, for many individuals, this might be something that they neglect. I often hear coaches say, well, I really would like to go to church or maybe read the Bible, but I just don't have enough time, or it's just something that gets sacrificed during the season. I would encourage you to do the opposite. That's the time to increase those measures. The more you're able to grow spiritually, maybe you're in a Bible study or a small group, maybe you're going to church and praying with your family or just talking to God to and from your drive to the office, whatever it may be, if your spiritual life is healthy, this is when I think you'll feel the best. So ultimately, if you're feeling a little out of balance, check one of these 4 quadrants. Which one of these can you do a little bit better job in? Is it the biological? Is there something genetic that maybe you need to talk to your doctor about for medication? Or how's your workouts? How's your eating? Is it psychological? Your thinking, feeling, and doing? Is it social? Your home life or your work life? Or is it spiritual? And if you're working all 4 of these, this is when your emotional health and well-being will be the best. Thanks for listening to the Mind of the Coach CD program. It's my sincere hope that something on this CD program helped inspire you to become a better coach, and that in turn, that would help propel your athletes to thrive in their sport and beyond. Thanks so much for listening to this program.